I've been touring and teaching for 35 years, thereabouts, and I've been to churches and spiritual centers, yoga centers, all kinds of different centers around the world. I really have, and there are a few that I definitely think were extraordinary. But this, beyond a shadow of a doubt, this is the best center I've ever been to. What we've created here is unique. There's a couple of centers that I enjoyed in terms of the architecture, a good vibe, even what I call a Christy feeling in some centers, but you would think that that's in all the churches and spiritual centers, and it isn't. Not all centers are about God, even though they call themselves spiritual centers, So we have co-created something really unique here, and I've said it 1,000 times, so it'll be 1,001 now, that I really appreciate what we all have created here. And even if you're just a guest, you're still somehow here and you're part of this unique experience. Because we say God first here, but we also keep that concept alive about Christ consciousness. And we talk about how to really nurture that inside ourselves. And trust me when I say, I've been to all the centers in the world, really, churches and Science of Mind, Unity, and so on. They don't all talk about God. They don't all talk about Christ consciousness. And least of all, they don't all talk about how to awaken that in ourselves. It's still kept a bit of a distance away. So, we should all just make sure that we include that in our prayers, the gratitude for one another as friends and so on. I will say, though, because of that, because churches aren't making God a priority, they will all be gone within a generation or two. Things that are not real are going to begin fading away. It may not be in the way you think some science fiction movie of, the earth opening up and a building dropping into the earth. But you can imagine just the way, if you listen carefully, politics and religion are already beginning to break up. When you see people losing their investment in things, that means illusions are being exposed. So, my wish is for all human beings to feel only the peace of God. But I will say that churches as we know them are going to start crumbling more and more. We see this in the world, but it's just going to keep happening. Now, it's not the content of church or spiritual centers. People can still gather in spirit, but the old version of it, the illusionary version of it, the ones that are not really bringing in the Spirit of God, those have to end. And those churches, all of them by all the titles, fundamental ones, the biggest ones on the planet, are already being exposed and threatened for what they are not, what they are and what they are not. So we have to really make sure that we understand that what we experience here is that unique. And it's unique because of that one simple thing, God first. But remember, take that into your homes. In our homes, it really needs to be God first. And find a playful, fun, integrated way to bring that. You don't have to bring it into your home as like staunch religious badgering of people that live with you. But to really bring that in a playful way. If I would have come here and been all serious all the time, we probably wouldn't feel half the spiritual vibe that we feel here. So church is supposed to be about God. It's supposed to be about love. It's supposed to be about learning and worship. All about God. All about feeling better. All about healing. And instead, churches have become about hypocrisy and business and just so on. It's just kind of ridiculous, but that's the way the world has become. And when it comes to organized religions, I truly believe that we're seeing in our lifetime the shift from one dimension to another, from one experience to another, from one reality to another. So all those things that we've heard prophesied are true. They're real. All the 2012 stuff, it's true. It's just not happening in a day. It happens over a period of time. But we're in that lifetime to make that transition. So we choose bring that love and playfulness even into our board meetings. Even though we have to have board meetings and do official kinds of things, how do you bring God into it? That's the trick. When you have a household, how do you bring God all the way down to the rules you have to deal with your children? How do you bring God into everything, even in your business world? God has to be brought into all things, or those things have to go. So, you can think of me if this few minutes of, another chapter of Michael's tirades. If you think this is difficult to listen to, just, try to be patient. Think of me as a woman who's finally getting a divorce from her experience, a 35-year marriage to the church, because that's what it's like. I've tried to help. I've tried to go to churches, and work with them. Some listen and some don't. I've tried to work with headquarters of this particular church and other churches, and they usually don't listen. 1999, I think it was, I gave a talk to the worldwide headquarters of some of the biggest metaphysical systems in the world. They asked me to go and speak to it was like their World Congress. And, they probably should have picked somebody else. But, I was like, welcome, good night to see you all. By the way, this will not exist, just a generation from now. And, they were all kind of, oh, this guy's a bummer. But, but I meant that for any of our stuff to exist, it has to make the transition. And if you don't have spirit in that system, that institution, then it will not. It will not. We have to spiritualize ourselves to make transition into a world of higher dimensional spirituality. Jesus himself, fought constantly with the Pharisees and so forth. And that's what we have, even today and even in this world. I don't know if you know this, but the book of Revelation that talks about the ending and ending times and so forth refers to the church as the world harlot, someone who sells themselves, someone who doesn't stick to their guns. And that is what the church has become. Fundamental religion of any kind is the harlot. And I'll explain that in just a sec. It's kind of interesting to me because there's a difference between, church has become political and business. And it's supposed to be God. Now, before we get on their case, because this will only take me a few minutes, before we get on their case, be sympathetic in this. Try to imagine if you were in charge of working with people spiritually. And then you have the pressures of politics, board meetings, bylaws, and all that stuff. It's mandatory, legally speaking. So we have to sympathize with them a little bit. But you can still find spiritualized ways. I mean, who else is going to do it? And if we can't do it, then what? It can't be done? It's our job to spiritualize even that institution that knows that it has to bring in business and so forth, but that shouldn't be the priority. God and love first. I've told you folks here, I don't go out and advertise and talk people into coming here. When I meet people in town, I don't tell them who I am. And I don't say, you ought to come over to Unity of Sedona. I do not do that. I keep it at most, my name's Michael, nice to meet you. Because I don't want to bring people here by hooking them, by advertising, by doing PR, kissing babies in town. Hi, I'm Michael Mirdad, local minister. Why don't you come over and join us? I don't want any of that. I've told people from when I got here, let's do our work. They feel it or they don't. That's how it can be. And if you don't want money to be a priority in the church, stop spending millions of dollars a year and needing people to then cover your butt for spending that money. Get back into God and keep it a day-to-day, day-at-a-time kind of a process. So one thing that might sound weird is that in politics, believe it or not, if God were actually judgmental, which it isn't, but if God were judgmental, it's the church leaders that would end up in hell. Other than that, there would be no rentals, nothing going on in hell. It would just be church leaders. Because Jesus never got on anybody's case. He didn't get on prostitutes' case. He didn't get on the tax collector's case. He would say, you want to join me for dinner? Oh, prostitute, you want to come over for dinner? Like, he didn't care. Because they are exactly what they say they are. Whose case did he get on? Hypocrites. And not just hypocrites, spiritual hypocrites. So hell would have those beings if there were such a, situation, judgment, and all that. The politicians wouldn't end up in hell because you almost expect them to do deal making and game playing, right? So they wouldn't end up in hell. They would just be in purgatory. Purgatory for politicians, purgatory would be having to sit down and not leave and have to listen to your own speeches over and over and over. So anyway, so really we have a standard to live up to, and I know it's not easy, but we have to be an example. And I go on tour and I have to be an example to other churches. And nobody will think anybody else is perfect all the time. But it's amazing to do our best to be as perfect as we can be. Perfect meaning consistent, being true to what we say. So I go to other churches and I explain the love and so on and so on. And it's like, we don't want to create, the churches and spiritual centers are acting as a bridge to God. That's what we're doing, guys. We're a bridge to God. So if you start making your job charging tolls on that bridge, something's gone wrong. You're supposed to be welcoming people freely over that bridge. That's why we keep doing all we can, even financially, to keep things affordable. And yet, we have the rent to pay. We have all that stuff to do. So we take care of business. We just don't make it the first priority. It's love and it's God and so on and so on. So that's, to me, what's most important. So all that said, what this ends up coming down to is this. In the battles that I've had, and you guys will probably find, especially within these institutions called church, is it's really a battle between the old school and the new school. That's what a lot of it is. The old school has their ways of doing things. That's what Jesus ran into, old school. And he was telling them, you can't stuff this old school stuff into the throats of people that aren't even bodies anymore. We're spiritual beings. This information needs to flow freely through us. The Spirit of God needs to flow freely through us. So something's got to change. And I've even had some of these churches get on my case in various ways. It's amazing. They're churches, but they've gotten on my case. We've had people from our own headquarters getting on my case, slandering me, saying we're not following the rules enough. Well, right. Watch. Here's my argument to that. None. Because I don't care. It's not my thing to just become part of that grind. I want to see us experiencing Spirit and God. So that's what you're going to get. That's what we've had here, and everybody seems to like it. We do have policies, and we do have rules, and of course, we stick to bylaws, and we obey the law, and so on. But we just do it with an air of fun. There is a way to do that. It's just rare enough to confuse people. So, yeah, right, And when we found these people doing this from headquarters, we asked them to apologize. Because they were calling other churches that I visited, saying, don't let this guy come to your church. And this is the spiritual behavior of people at our spiritual institution. We just let them know that we caught wind of it. Because the other ministers in the world like me enough to say, wow, Michael, guess what they're doing to you? How cool was that? I said, well, thank you, man. So I told them, hey, we found out about this. Not an apology. They weren't going to do that. So I'm seeing this all important, and I'm sharing this with you because all of these things are coming to an end. So know that when we don't dance the dance that other people sometimes want us to do, it's not just flippantly to be belligerent. It's because we're going to keep following. And I shared quotes from Jesus and the apostles over the last few weeks. And look at the way they dealt with this. They said no to that kind of stuff. They said no to that hyper-administrative kind of a world. So I've had people, I had a church one time have a meeting, and they asked me, I needed to convert, they thought I might be gay. So they wanted me, I don't know why, even though I wear blouses and so forth, but they wanted me to confirm for them that I was not gay before they'd let me talk at their church. And I told the board president, here's what you can tell them. And I'll keep it clean. So here's what you can tell them. I said, and I don't think they went and told them this, but I said, man, when I get there, I'm gonna come in wearing Birkenstocks. I'm gonna have a big rainbow on my shirt, and I want to enter to an Elton John song playing. So they didn't invite me. So no, I wouldn't really do that. And having said that, please know that I'm very respectful as a person. When in Rome, do as the Romans do. So I play the game and respect where I'm at. I've written a book on sacred sexuality. I tell my staff, do not bring that book to other churches when I go there, because that may be not a thing of interest to them, or they may not understand it. So I totally believe in that. It's just that I'm also seeing, as I've gotten older and older in my life, there's certain games that I won't play. That's, part of what's happening. So, it's like, if churches are asking me, how do we raise the spirit of our center, yoga centers, any center, how do we do what you guys do at Unity of Sedona? I'm going to tell them. I had a call last night from a big conference that wants to take place. They want to organize their conference, but they want it to feel like this. So I had to explain to them, here's how you make anything feel like this. God first. Make things affordable, and so on and so on. I gave them this big speech about this. But when people, can't live up to this, I say this. I go to these churches and say, if you have a minister, if you have board members that don't like the idea of God first, get rid of them. It sounds really harsh. Get rid of them. Because you don't want that ego energy fighting the direction you're trying to go. So if something tries to, and I'm saying this to all of us, when something tries to squash that spirit in us, that is the voice of the ego trying to destroy us, do something about it. So Jesus' comment was, it's better that you pluck out your own eye than to let that eye, or your hand, than to let that part of your being cast you into hell. It's a metaphor. If someone is ruining your life, a partnership that you tried and it can't get repaired, sometimes say goodbye. Because all of you are sinking if you don't say goodbye to the one anchor that you've tied around your waist and threw into the quicksand. Sometimes just cut and let it go. And that's my attitude with the churches. There's one church that I counsel with. This was sort of an accident just in an airport. And I'm almost done here. This was a church leader. He was a bishop to a whole region of one of the largest churches in the country or in the world. And he was telling me, one of the struggles we have is, we try to be giving, we try to let go and let each church of ours do somewhat their own thing. Yes, there's rules to follow, but we try to give them some license, some room. But there's one, he said, who will not allow African Americans in to their church. And I'm going, you're saying this to me as though this is an option. You're saying they will not allow it. We've tried. He said, we tried. We've talked to them and they won't do it. I'm going, but you're saying it as though it's an option. No. Do something about it. And it sounds so intense to some people, but you don't have to allow this kind of behavior. It's just crazy. And it's also, like I told him, man, I would start another war of the North and South, if I had to, because this is old school and it's got to end. Now, I don't believe in being hurtful or anything like that, but where we can make a difference, let's make a difference. And these people have the ability to say no to that hurtfulness, and they're just too intimidated to do it. So, to each his own. I've seen enough and heard enough on this planet, and I'm just saying to you all that it's coming to an end. Churches as we know them, because of these behaviors and allowing things like this, racial issues to still exist, it's ridiculous. To allow hurtfulness to still exist. And I'm not talking about being strict by rules. I'm talking about heart. The heart has to come first. God has to come first, and our heart has to be involved in this. So we have to all learn to open our hearts again to experience. Church is supposed to be right here. It's actually not the building and the rules. It's really the heart. So we learn to be the living embodiment of the church. And there are people that will not come here or to any other so-called church because of the past behaviors. So I've said, look, that all has to end. It's old school. Let's bring the Spirit back into this experience. And that's why people love what we do. Despite my having this big proclamation now, it sounds so intense, but I'm saying this because this is the end of the year, and I'm telling you, predicting you're going to see these changes happen. Churches, keep watching. The mainstream churches are starting to crumble. And one of the reasons is because there's a few people that aren't doing it the old way. People like Joel Osteen. He's out there talking about love, and all his fellow Christians hate him, mainly because he's making more money than they are. And that's what church has become. So learn to say no. Learn to tell your friends and relatives when you hear about stuff like this, especially in spiritual centers. Say no. Bring back God. Bring God and make God the priority in all of this. I've had enough of this goes back to the Pope and the King who turned on the Knights Templar and had them all assassinated. The ones that hunted down the Cathars and had them all killed because they were doing what we're doing. And the church keeps saying no. And the Pharisees crucified Jesus because there's that war between the old school and new school, between spirit and that pharisaical kind of mindful, judgmental lifestyle. So we're at the dawn of a new age, guys. We're right in the middle of, or coming to the end of the first step, the end of the beginning of a new life. So I'm like, no, let's come to life. Let's have fun. Even the one time I jokingly hung right there our pirate flag. Because the Knights Templar, when they were assassinated by the Pope and the church, and they just hit the high seas and became the first pirates in our history. They weren't the ones that digress into being just criminals, but they were the originals that said, no. They hit the high seas and they pillaged the king and the Pope's treasures on the high seas because they could. And we only did it kind of jokingly for a couple days. Then when people complained, I said, leave it up for a month. So we did. So the hypocrisies in the world of medicine, that's not my world. The hypocrisy in the world of politics, that's not my world. But the hypocrisy I've seen in church, this is where I hang. And so, I'm sharing these ideas because something's got to change. And I'm also proud to say that you guys have been an example that I've shared with other people to say no more of this. And because I've had a lot of these people coming after me and after us over the last years of being that I've seen here, it's all the more I see this hypocrisy. And so I'm proud that, this is our ship, and that we're saying no to this stuff. And it's not just about unity of Sedona. What we're doing here is a statement for the whole world. Just like what Martin Luther King Jr. did, it was a statement, this one person with a group of people, but it had an effect globally. Well, what we're doing is having an effect globally. We're one voice in the wilderness. We're one voice out of many. But if we're consistent, that consistency and that love and that dedication to God will be a loud enough voice to make a difference. So I appreciate you hearing that. Oh, thank you. Thanks, guys.